For 13 months in the mid-1960s, a small town in West Virginia became the strangest place in America. Hundreds of people reported a winged, red-eyed creature. Phones rang with voices that seemed to know things they couldn't know. And on a December evening in 1967, almost to the day 1 year after it all began, a bridge collapsed into the Ohio River and killed 46 people. This is the story behind the Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. And it's one of the strangest, most argued about books in the entire UFO field. It starts in November 1966 in an area locals called the TNT-zone, a stretch of abandoned World War II munitions bunkers in the McClintock Wildlife Management Area outside Point Pleasant. Two young couples driving through late at night reported a towering figure, 6 to 7 feet tall, wings folded against its back, with two glowing red eyes that reflected in their headlights like a pair of bicycle reflectors. They weren't the only ones. Over the following days and weeks, more reports came in from around the county, and a local nickname stuck almost immediately, borrowed half-jokingly from a campy movie villain, Mothman. John Keel wasn't a fringe writer chasing a story from a distance. He was an experienced journalist who moved into the area and stayed there personally through the entire flap, interviewing witnesses as the reports came in real time, not years later from memory. He found a close collaborator in Mary Hyre, a local newspaper reporter who'd been covering the sightings from the start and knew half the county personally. Together they worked the story the way you'd work a real investigation, chasing down names, cross-checking descriptions, sitting with people who were frightened and didn't know who else to talk to. And the case didn't stay contained to sightings of the creature itself. Just 2 weeks before that first TNT area encounter, on November 2nd, 1966, a Point Pleasant area salesman named Woodrow Derenberger was driving home on Interstate 77 when, he said, an object shaped like an old kerosene lamp globe dropped into the road and blocked his path. A man stepped out and told him telepathically, "Be not frightened. We come from a country that is not nearly as powerful as yours. We mean you no harm." The being identified itself as Indrid Cold and described a homeworld called Lanulos. Whatever actually happened to Derenberger that night, what happened to him afterward is well documented and genuinely sad. Harassing phone calls, lost friendships, lost work, strangers showing up at his house, a bitter divorce, and eventually leaving the area entirely. Keel used cases like this to argue that the personal cost paid by witnesses was itself part of the phenomenon, not an unrelated footnote. As 1967 went on, the sightings kept coming, alongside poltergeist-style disturbances and phone calls that people swore contained information nobody should have had. Then, on November 19, 1967, Mary Hyre told Keel about a nightmare that had shaken her badly. She'd dreamed of people drowning in the river, with Christmas packages floating everywhere in the water. Keel wrote that down. 26 days later, at 5:05 in the evening, on December 15, 1967, during rush hour, with a bridge full of cars and Christmas shoppers, the silver bridge across the Ohio River buckled and collapsed. 46 people died. It happened almost exactly 13 months after that first TNT area sighting. To be clear about what's actually established here, the federal investigation into the Silver Bridge collapse found a specific, mundane, entirely physical cause. A single structural eye-bar had developed an internal crack from corrosion and metal fatigue over decades of service, a flaw that routine inspection couldn't have caught. Nobody disputes that engineering finding, including Keel. What his book focuses on instead is the timing, the wave of sightings starting almost exactly a year before, escalating through the fall, and then simply stopping after the bridge went down, as if whatever had been happening in Point Pleasant had run its course. Whether that pattern means anything beyond coincidence is exactly the question the book never fully resolves, and never claims to. Here's where the book gets philosophically interesting, and why researchers still argue about it today. Most UFO writers in the 1960s and 70s were trying to prove the extraterrestrial hypothesis: craft from another planet, pilots from another world. Keel looked at his own data from Point Pleasant and concluded that explanation didn't fit. The entities he was documenting didn't behave like visiting scientists. They behaved like something that had always been here, embedded in human folklore under different names for centuries, manipulating perception rather than making first contact. He called this the ultraterrestrial hypothesis, and it's the direct ancestor of the interdimensional framework Jacques Vallée would later develop with far more academic rigor in Passport to Magonia, which we reviewed in an earlier episode. Keel also introduced an idea that sounds almost paranoid on its face, but has become a working assumption for serious UAP researchers since, that the phenomenon may be deliberately deceptive, not just unexplained, but actively staging encounters, feeding investigators false leads, and enjoying the confusion it causes. Derenberger's harassment, the strange men who showed up asking odd questions around Point Pleasant, the phone calls with impossible information. Keel treats all of it as part of one coordinated pattern of misdirection. That's a strange thing to build a research framework around, but if you followed modern disclosure reporting, deception and misdirection show up constantly, even in accounts that have nothing to do with Mothman. Keel was arguing this in 1975, decades before it became a mainstream talking point. Now, the honest caveats, because this book earns them. Keel's writing moves fluidly between documented witness testimony and his own speculation, and he doesn't always signal clearly which is which. Some of his most dramatic claims, direct telepathic communication, detailed Men in Black encounters, are simply unverifiable from the outside, resting entirely on what witnesses told him. This is a serious, well-sourced hypothesis built on real, contemporaneous witness interviews, not a straightforwardly documented case file. And it's also, at times, more sensational in tone than Vallée's more careful academic treatment of similar territory. It's also worth knowing that the 2002 film adaptation starring Richard Gere compresses and fictionalizes a great deal of this, moving events to a different decade and inventing a personal storyline for its lead character. If you've only seen the movie, the book covers far more ground and stays much closer to what Keel actually documented at the time. So why does a 50-year-old regional case still matter to disclosure research in 2026? Because Keel's core argument that we may be dealing with a persistent, deceptive, non-human intelligence rather than simple interstellar visitors is now a live position among serious UAP researchers, not a fringe one. And the Point Pleasant case itself has never been explained away. The number of independent witnesses, the specific and consistent physical description, and the documented timing relative to the bridge collapse all resist the easy answer of mass hysteria or misidentified owls, which remains the most common skeptical explanation offered. Who should read this one? Anyone exploring the ultra-terrestrial or interdimensional side of UAP research, rather than the strictly nuts and bolts craft from another planet side. Read it alongside our review of Passport to Magonia for the more academically rigorous version of the same core idea. If this breakdown helped, subscribe for more honest, no-hype UFO book reviews every week, drop a like so more people find it, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. The full written review with sourcing notes and where to buy the book or the audiobook is linked in the description below. Thanks for watching.